BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Phil Goodlad and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. It's Wednesday the 20th of November. Dearie me, where is November going? Here's what's on the agenda today.
Celtic are in here behind, chance for Celtic to open a scoring, they've done so! Celtic with the opening goal!
After last week's narrow defeat, can Celtic go one better as they take on Chelsea again in the Women's Champions League? Also,
Tierney's on to the edge of the box, moves forward on the right foot, goes for goal! That's brilliant! Outstanding goal from Václav Tierney!
he's helped sign the likes of Václav Tierney, but what does Niels Koppen's move to become technical director actually mean for Rangers? And
there is a genuine mood of cautious optimism. That's probably the way I would put it. There is a hope that this is something that's been needed to just snap the club out of the structure it's been in.
As one of Scotland's oldest clubs falls into administration, we ask what's next for Dumbarton.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
Great to have you along this morning. I'm joined by John Walker and Joelle Murray, the Eric and Ernie of the Scottish Football Podcasting worlds. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, Phil.
I'll let you battle out who's Eric and who's Ernie. I was going to say Bert and Ernie, but I didn't know anybody would actually know who Bert and Ernie was these days. Whereas at least with Eric and Ernie, there's still, as we come up to Christmas, a chance that they'll know who we're talking about. We'll come to all things Scottish football in just a moment. Firstly, just your thoughts on Scotland. We know that Scotland will now be in pot 3 for next month's World Cup qualifying draw. This after all the results came pouring in around Europe last night in the Nations League. The Czech Republic and Slovakia both winning last night, which means that Scotland are in the third pot. I wonder, Joelle, what have you made of Scotland's recent form? And I guess how optimistic are you going into those World Cup qualifiers?
I think the way that we've ended the campaign has been absolutely unbelievable. I think we've shown a lot of characteristics in both of those performances, both from a kind of purely football perspective, because I think when you look at a lot of the goals, the build-up, the finishes have been unbelievable, but equally so the doggedness, the passion, the desire to win at all costs. And I think across the two performances, it's been an absolutely fantastic Scotland performance. But like you said, it's just unfortunate that we couldn't get that level of quality at the beginning.
And John, I know there is nothing that motivates you more is the simplicity of a flat back four, but it's almost refreshing to see football and the sort of the fashionistas come back to the idea that, see, if you play two centre halves and two full backs, it's actually a pretty simple game.
I know, and switching to a back four's made me a lot of words on Anthony Ralston, because I think in a settled back four rather than the right wing back and you put Ben Doak in front of him, I think it makes Anthony Ralston look more comfortable. John Souttar's very comfortable in that scenario. Him and Grant Hanley are good at defending their box, are good at defending deep. It allows Andy Robertson a bit more room to get forward, actually combining with somebody in front of him. So, yeah, good. I like the back four. I hope it stays. I hope they find a way to fit Kieran Tierney in there, because I still think he can play left centre half in a four. And we keep going forward with it. And now that we're learning to beat teams at this level, hopefully that'll put us in good stead for the next part of this qualification.
And there is one thing with the qualification draw on Friday, is that after what we've seen over the last two games, Scotland won't fear anybody, will they?
No, and I said this at the time, I don't actually think there was a lot of change, if I get this saying right, whether we were in pot 2 versus some of the pot 3 teams we could have had, or whether we were in pot 3 and some of the pot 2 teams we could have had in the World Cup qualifier. I didn't think there was a lot to choose between some of the teams, so you could get an easier draw with pot 2 than you could have with a hard draw in pot 3. So I'm not concerned about that. I think the seed 1 team will take care of itself. They'll be difficult to beat if they've not already secured their spot. But no, I'm quite happy. We'll
get into much more football in just a moment. Firstly, I want to bring in Fraser Clarke. He's from the Daily Record. He's been across all things Dumbarton over the last 48 hours. Fraser, morning to you. From a Dumbarton point of view, they've slipped into administration. They're now bottom of League One after being deducted 15 points. But this wasn't a story that just happened overnight. This has been a gradual problem for Dumbarton that's finally come to fruition.
Yeah, I think it's been to be honest, it's possibly been in the making for around about 15 years. It's certainly been in the making since the takeover in 2021. It's one of these things that I think to people looking from the outside, it came as a shock. I think to people maybe more closely connected with the club, how quickly everything escalated. I mean, you're talking about the Scotland game, and I was just planning to just sit on Monday evening and enjoy the Scotland game. And all of a sudden, those plans went out the window when my phone started ringing and everyone started going, right, this administration is happening now. The club has been, I think the official way that the Sun Supporters Trust have worded it, or the sort of diplomatic way, is it's been subject to an opaque ownership structure. I think that's probably a fairly accurate way of putting it for all this time. And it feels like this outcome of Suns going into administration was only ever a matter of time. And I think now it's happened, and taking off my reporter hat and putting on my fan hat, like now it's happened, it's almost a relief in some way, because it felt like this was coming, and now it's like, okay, what happens now? Where do we go from here?
And we have another administration situation that involves a club that is to do with a land deal. And the reason why I pose it as a fairly loose question to you is that it's again so complicated, with deals that had been struck that didn't come to fruition, that affected different deals. But essentially, the running of Dumbarton Football Club was as much to do with this land deal that was in place as the actual nuts and bolts of a game every Saturday.
Yeah, and I think the previous two owners have all been in it for the land. So for anyone listening to this podcast, you've probably been to Dumbarton Stadium. If not, you probably know where it is. And it's on what looks like prime site, right in the shadow of the rock, right in the banks of the Clyde. You can see why you'd want to build houses there. You can see why you think, I'll buy that land that happens to come with a football club attached, and we'll get developed and we'll move the football club to a bit of land that's maybe a bit less pricey, or has a bit less potential for housing on it. I think where that's fallen down, and certainly as I understand it, is that land is formerly a dry dock for the shipyards. It was filled in with whatever I think they could find, and that's one of the reasons that the football ground was built there and not houses in the first place. As far as I understand it, if there was to be any residential building there, they would need to be doing soil samples on the ground to basically make sure that it was safe to build houses. If those came back as negative, then the ground is in effect fairly worthless to developers, which is why the football club was put there in the first place. And nobody seems prepared yet to do the soil samples. I don't know exactly how much they've cost. I've heard figures of about £20,000 bandied around. If it costs that, if you invest as a developer £20,000 in soil samples, they come back and say this isn't suitable to build on, then there's the potential there that your investment is ultimately worthless.
The administrators, Quintuma, who've been appointed in the last 24 hours, they say that the administration comes as a result of the club, and this is their statement, not receiving significant funds from the sale of land in 2021. I'm astounded that 3 years on, we're talking about a sale of land, yet we're not talking about soil samples that's been done.
Yeah, the sale of land, I think, is probably the $1 million question for Quintuma now to try and get to the bottom of, is how did this happen? Now, again, the Suns Trust say that the land was effectively sold to, and I've got their statement in front of me just so I know exactly what I'm saying here, to a shell housing development company created by Cognitive Capital being the owners of the club. That's what the Trust are saying. I think that's something that Quintuma are obviously going to look into, because like you say, 3 years down the line, to not even have £300,000 paid for a portion of land that you sold, no wonder the club's in this situation. The only thing I would add is that round about that time, Sun sold their stadium naming rights and their shirt sponsorship rights to a building company from the north of England. The names were on the shirts, the name was on the stadium. If you watched Sports Scene Results, then that's where they would throw to. And no money was ever received for that either. So it does appear like there's been a total lack of, I guess, due diligence behind the scenes as to getting everything signed up, getting money paid forward before any deals are agreed. And I think that's why Suns fans knew this was coming.
I know if you're a Dumbarton fan this morning, the same as if you were an Inverness Cally Thistle fan last month, that there's a lot of fear around the actual very existence of your club going forward. But administration can also be, if you like, a relief, as you mentioned, but a sense of just stripping everything back and almost starting again. And I guess from a Dumbarton fan's point of view today, Fraser, that's how they have to look at this.
Yeah, I would say that there is a genuine mood of cautious optimism. That's probably the way I would put it. Like, there is a hope that this is something that's been needed to just snap the club out of the structure it's been in. Somebody I spoke to yesterday described this as being like a zombie club, a zombie ownership structure. Effectively, this was always coming, it was dead, and it was lurching from one week to another without ever making any positive progress. I don't have any doubts that this is going to be incredibly, incredibly difficult for Dumbarton, but I think the hope is this might be short-term pain for a more long-term gain. And we look, certainly a lot of Suns fans I've spoken to have looked at Clydebank, and Clydebank went through a hell of a time when they went under and ended up reforming and coming back up from the lowest rung of juniors, and are now flying as like a sustainable community club with that fan ownership structure. I think a lot of Suns fans are looking at that and going, can we build something similar to Clydebank? Because that's probably something that they've all been quite envious of over the past 10 years or so, as Dumbarton's ownership has basically gone to pot off the pitch.
We'll see what happens, but it's almost a penny for the thought for Dumbarton fans amid turmoil for their club. Fraser Clarke from the Daily Record, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Moving on, it's another big game in the Women's Champions League this evening. Celtic taking on Chelsea at Stamford Bridge just a week after the sides met in Glasgow with that 2-1 win for Chelsea. But Joelle Murray, it was a 2-1 win that in many ways Celtic earned more plaudits than Chelsea, because with the greatest respect to the champions, Chelsea were expected to come up here and have a field day, and they simply didn't, and that's all credit to Celtic.
Yeah, it is indeed, and certainly I was one of those who was a little bit fearful, knowing that Chelsea were coming up, and that's not to discredit Celtic, because obviously I know firsthand playing against them this season, obviously on the sidelines watching them, I know how much of a threat and the quality that they possess, but Chelsea are a different animal, and as I say, I was one of those who was a little bit fearful, but all credit to Celtic. They took a little while to feel themselves into that game at Parkhead, but certainly they stood up for themselves. It was a competitive game, and I think Chelsea really, really got a fright.
I was hearing Elena Sadiku's press conference yesterday, who said that Celtic are stronger after their 3-2 defeat to Rangers last weekend, going into this match. What does she mean by that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's maybe from a mindset perspective. They feel they shouldn't have lost that game at the weekend. So from a mindset, they might have that extra determination and grit to really go down there and again compete and take their first points in the competition tonight. But certainly it won't be an easy game. I think Chelsea will potentially have learned their lessons. They heavily rotated their squad. I think from the WSL game prior to the Parkhead game, they introduced 8 new players, and albeit players that will walk into any club in the country, no doubt, but certainly I don't think we'll see that level of rotation, and I think we will see another gritty, strong Celtic performance.
Will we though see, despite that gritty performance from Celtic, will we see a Chelsea side that wants to make a statement, who were maybe, I'm not going to say embarrassed that they only won 2-1, but that they maybe failed to live up to the expectations at Parkhead last week, that they maybe want to make their own statement tonight? Yeah,
absolutely. I think, as I say, the rotation last week was quite heavy, resting key players, Millie Bright in the heart of their defence, Nuskin, Ramirez, Macario, all players, especially the latter two, that at the top end of the pitch are absolutely lethal. So I do think we'll see a little bit of rotation, but not that level, because like you said, Chelsea are on their home ground at Stamford Bridge with their fans all backing them, and I think they will want to make a statement and really enhance that kind of flawless start, not just in the Champions League but in the WSL. They of course had a fantastic 2-0 win against Man City at the weekend, so they're a top class team, and all credit to Celtic for really pushing them, because I think last week at Parkhead they were certainly the team at the end who were more likely to get a goal.
I'm just wondering as well, Joelle, over the last 8 days, Celtic will have played Chelsea at a first ever match at Parkhead in the Champions League for the women's team. Then they would have played rivals Rangers, and then they're down in London tonight. Is that the most intensive period for the Celtic players that they will ever have encountered? And I just wonder, as a former player yourself, how much that would take out of them, that intensive burst of high quality opponents and high quality matches.
Yeah, there's no denying physically it naturally takes it out of you. There's not to mention on the back of that run you've just mentioned there, they had Glasgow City 120 minutes in the League Cup, penalties, which I know they didn't want to go that long way. But yeah, physically, absolutely, very, very tiring, very fatiguing on the bodies, but also mentally, Phil, I think not that it's difficult to get yourself up for these big games, but certainly you need to shift and find a place, find a mindset that you've probably not been before, because you absolutely can't afford in these elite games at the top level of the game to switch off. So I actually spoke to Shannon McGregor. She was at our game on Sunday, and I asked the same thing, the fatigue, how are you all finding it? And she openly admitted that they are fatigued, but it doesn't dent their desire and determination. So what they've had to do is maybe on a training day come off the pitch ever so slightly earlier than they would maybe normally have, just to take into consideration the run that they've currently been on.
Finally, Rangers have appointed their Director of Football Recruitment, Niels Koppen, as Technical Director. John, always with your finger on the Ibrox pulse. What does this mean to have Koppen do two prominent roles combined in his one day?
Yeah, I think Niels Koppen is a very good appointment that Rangers have made in the technical director role. I think the interview he did with Rangers TV 2 months ago now was very detailed in what he had brought to the recruitment team. I know fans will point to a lot of the what they think's failed recruitment and not good enough recruitment over the summer, but you are trying to fix a wage bill that's severely problematic that he has made an impact on already. So I think with the data technicians and the technical scouts that he'd brought in within his team already since January joining, I think he's probably stood the team up on the recruitment side up as best as he could, and for what Rangers are trying to look to as they go into a quote unquote modern world of football.
Are these though not two really important jobs and two busy jobs? So to combine them into one, it seems like there's not enough hours in the day for him.
I think the opposite. I think the technical director role, consuming the head of recruitment, overseeing player trading model, when you've made the appointments you've made in the recruitment team already since joining, I think he's probably stood the team up to run itself now. And as a technical director, he'll oversee the player trading model. He'll oversee the data technicians. He'll oversee the actual transfers, because I know that's something he does like getting involved in. I can only assume from the exposure he had at PSV, which is a very successful recruitment team, a very successful player trading model, a very successful footballing team, that he's taken a lot of learnings, even though if he's not been qualified to those roles that he now has. He'll have seen how the sausage is made. He's not an idiot. He's a guy that's coming in. He's probably looked at Rangers and went, for a club this size in modern football, Rangers is run terribly. It's awful the way the club's run, the way the club has been run. I think he probably sees a lot of that already installed in the recruitment side. He's quite comfortable to take that over, because he must see gaps in the academy, in the club structure. And the caveat to all that and all these promotions and the Philippe Clement new contract, when there doesn't seem to be a boss in charge, it only stands to right if there is a CEO kind of already been appointed in the background that we don't know about and is going to be announced in the next 4 to 8 weeks.
Now, listen, stop playing with us. If you're saying that, you must know that something is coming.
I've got no clue. I'm just a loudmouth on Twitter, Phil. I just listen to what I'm being told.
Listen, if you listen to what's being told on Twitter, you need to change your ways, Mr. Walker. But you think that an appointment like this is so critical for Rangers' future, both on and off the park, that actually there is somebody that is coming in that will actually be sanctioning these things?
Yeah, I would hope so. I would hope that, or the interim chairman's willing to actually take the responsibility that's been bestowed upon him and actually start making difficult decisions and putting the right people. Anytime I've heard Niels Koppen speak, I agree with almost everything he says. Obviously, without seeing any results, it's hard to judge someone. I think the recruitment at Rangers has been quite good. I think he's signed the right type of player, the right type of age. I can see why he's signed those players. I think he's got rid of the right players on high wages that were causing a real budget problem. I like little things, and I know this gets into the bracket of calling on ex-professionals that get it or know the club. I don't agree with that, but I think in ambassadorial roles, absolutely. I think we've not got a head of academy just now. And I think in Kevin Thompson, there's an obvious ex-player that's came through an academy in Scottish football at Hibs, so knows what that's like to come through academy. He's been a Scotland international. He's made it to Rangers. He's played in a European final. He knows Rangers. He's been in Rangers academy. He's won stuff as a coach in the Rangers academy. I think is a head of an academy appointment, and he did talk a lot about the DNA of the club and people that understand the club and people that have been in modern football. I think Kevin Thompson's another one that should be involved in the club. So I think Niels Koppen kind of understands from probably a lot when I look at PSV's structure, the way they're structured, a lot of what he's saying seems to be lift and shift of what good looks like and trying to replicate it at Rangers.
Sorry, just texting Kevin Thompson now to say 20% of your signing on fee goes to John Walker. I signed that. I'm sure he'll get back to me. Listen, before we go, there was some rumours this week, fairly substantial rumours doing the rounds in the media. Again, it's like looking at Twitter. Believe that if you want. But that Philippe Clement was being lined up to take over with his native Belgium if the national side's results continued as poorly as they have been recently. So we would go from a manager who had been under severe pressure domestically with Rangers that could be potentially, according to reports, lined up to take over Belgium. I wonder, John, would that make sense for the Belgium FA? Is Philippe Clement viewed as highly with the work that he's doing, not just at Ibrox, but in the work prior to getting the Rangers job, that he would actually be seen as a potential Belgium manager?
I would drive him to Belgium myself if that was the case. I think Philippe Clement isn't necessarily a modern football coach, hands-on, doing the things. I do think he's a figurehead, and I think you've seen that when he first came into Rangers. He was mentally quite strong. A lot of it was mentality. That's what international managers are kind of grown on, because you don't get the time with players. You're kind of off-site most of the year. I mean, for Rangers fans, I think that would be the dream. I know it's kind of based on 2+2 with this new technical director of Belgian football that worked with him at Bruges. So I don't know if it's just a 2+2 scenario, but I think it would be almost the perfect scenario for every single Rangers fan.
Joelle, do you see like a Clement as an international manager as opposed to a club manager? Because you do get an almost different sense with some managers who like the day-to-day running of the clubs, the setting out the cones, etc. on the training field, but you then also get your suited and booted elder statesmen, if you like, managers who sit at the touchline that like to overview and delegate, that may be more of an international model.
Yeah, he absolutely fits that profile if we're looking at an international manager with that kind of pedigree. Certainly I'm obviously not close enough to it from surface level. It seems like Rangers fans, or the majority of Rangers fans, aren't happy with Clement at the moment, and certainly John's just reinforced that belief. So yeah, I agree. When I first saw it, I wasn't sure if it was the link that had associated him to the role, or his current and previous kind of experiences in the game. But certainly it does sound like if it is legit, it might be potentially the best scenario for all parties.
I should just point out we're talking about rumours and reports that's been doing the rounds in the newspapers of late, and nothing else. So if you see John Walker driving at breakneck speed in Glasgow anytime soon, he's maybe not heading to Belgium. He's maybe just out for a drive. Listen, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much, John Walker, Joelle Murray, and earlier Fraser Clarke from the Daily Record. Great to have you along. Full live commentary, Chelsea Celtic in the Women's Champions League. It's for you tonight on BBC Radio Scotland. That's online, on digital, and on your smartphone. Sports Sound on air from 7 o'clock. Remember to, bright and early, every day, dropping at BBC Sounds or where you get your podcasts. The Scottish Football Daily Podcast. Make sure and subscribe. Push your notifications on when it comes to your phone. For now, though, I'm Phil Goodlad. Enjoy the beautiful game, and we'll speak again soon.
Just a quick reminder, the Behind the Goals podcast is available every Tuesday with me, Rachel Corsey.
And me, Leanne Crichton. It's your one-stop shop for our take on everything that's happening in the world of football.
Just head to BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts and search for Behind the Goals.